I saw behind the mask of the women when I was studying the manosphere this week. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. I want to be innocent of this. Look at Australia and the stuff that's going on there with regard to, camps for people who don't take medical treatment of some sort.
If you let women in politics, you will get that. Meanwhile, the left is doing what they always do because they're cognitively female and they're doubling down. They're all doubling down. And the problem is they're doubling down because they overstepped and now they're afraid. Right? And like, so, of course.
It's interesting because it's a herd mentality. It is a herd. And Armstrong said this. There's no leader. He's like, it's leaderless.
The endless ability of magical thinking, which is necessary for child. If you think about it as a man trying to raise children, why? They're obnoxiously difficult, burdensome, whatever. But a woman, I always use the outlier example of mothers of serial killers never believe their kids do it. The fathers are like, hang the fucker.
Pretty true.
But that's what it takes to be a mom. The female mind needs to deny it. Why? Because they need to avoid any semblance of conflict or judgment. They can't do truth before face, masculine versus female. What's the difference?
It's too agreeable.
Well, it's actually fear. Agreeableness is fear. We don't think of it that way. The purpose of agreeableness is to reduce friction. Psychology departments have been producing this agreeableness is good. Now, this is kind of astounding to me, but it turns out that agreeableness is a negative. You actually want people to be disagreeable, so they search for truth.
Well, how is agreeableness bad?
It puts you face before truth.
It puts you in stagnation.
You see this most exemplary in military versus clerical. The military culture can't afford to be magical thinking. You die.
They're not agreeable either.
Right? They're not agreeable. It's too dangerous. What happens in clerical culture? You find an excuse to be agreeable on fucking everything. It's devolutionary, the female false promise of non-aggression. So what females do is they're telling you, I'm not aggressive. They just aggress against you socially and informationally in the background. They undermine.
The intuition which creates this feminine intuition style, intuitive style. And it's like
can't imagine that people feel differently and have different interests and would act differently.
I observed the thought from the good leftists appears to be that anybody who doesn't agree with them is evil in some fashion, greedy, or has some kind of character defect, right?
That real answer is that the magical thinking mind justifies. So the underlying cause is they don't like conflict and they don't want responsibility for managing conflict. So the way you do that is projection. And you say everybody's like me and everybody should be like me, everybody should think like me, value like me, want like me.
Right. So then the only way that I would behave like you are behaving is if I was doing something crooked. That's, I guess it's how they project it.
Right, except that the problem is that they can't envision the rational incentives of people in different conditions. Whereas what they would do, if they were in those positions, they would rationalize that action just like they rationalize their own. Why? Because they want to avoid the responsibility for conflict management. They're trying to avoid conflict. Try to think of it as stealing by discounting. A female mind is basically the guy that goes into the store and steals the Snickers bar because, these guys have more than I do, they won't miss it. That's all that's going on in the leftist mind. Because if they were in a different position, they justify that. Look at every leftist. That's what they do. What are they really talking about? Conflict evasion. And so what they really mean is, I don't want to adapt. I don't want to learn.
Responsibility, right?
They don't want responsibility. They don't have to think about it. They just feel. They can't perceive systems. They just can't. It's like being colorblind. We can sort of perceive their experientialness, like the way we can perceive children or women. We're not motivated by it or excited by it, but we can at least vaguely understand it. They can't understand systems. They can't even comprehend what loyalty, purity, and sanctity mean. They don't even comprehend those things. We tend to think of females as generalists and conservatives as specialists. They do get generalism and general task ability. In other words, they have low transaction costs of moving at the cost of specialization. We have high transaction costs of movement in the furtherance of increasing specialization. But the truth is, when it comes to time, we don't specialize, we generalize. When it comes to time, they specialize. So there's always this trade-off that's going on because of division of time. Well, why does the female left mind and the male right mind work the way they do? Well, it's a division of time. Well, if you divide time up, you're going to get systems on one end and experiences on the other. But you're also going to get task switching on the female end and specialization on the other. Because how do you produce a specialization? Over time.
Right, and the task switching is essential if you're in time. I chatted with the nurse, and she told me that she had 4 kids, and I said, I talked to you, and I said, he tells me that after 4 children, the women start processing information correctly. I didn't know quite what I was going to get back, and she goes, "That's right."
They'll tell you. Women with 4, 5, 6 kids, they'll tell you. They're all there because they don't have any choice. In women, that cognitive bias is they don't even realize what they mean is men will take care of it. And what the left doesn't say, thinks that they either think men will take care of it or the planet will take care of it or the herd will take care of it. But they never they never do the measurement. And if they do, they lie about it in oversimplified terms. You either get the female brain or the male brain or some mixture. So the problem is, how does something get decided? Now, we all know that, the whole thing of when you're waiting to press the button, the decision to press the button happens before you're aware of it. That's the competition has been won.
Right.
So in a feels person, the weight is always toward providing decidability on the unknown or the imperceptible by feels. In the reals people, the decision is always made by the intuition on the side of the reals or systematizing. So this is why you see fathers saying stupid things to their children and mothers shaking their heads, and why mothers saying stupid things about politics and fathers shaking their heads, is because the decision isn't actually a rational calculation. Women need to think that way in family.
In the aggregate sense, right?
Right, they need to think that way. Otherwise, if I was trying to be raised by my dad, I wouldn't be here. The women think they should be in charge. But why are women never in charge?
The question is self-evident in my opinion.
Well, it's obvious, but you can't convince them of that. Because, right, so, it's like, okay.
It's just the third rail is so near. It's raising my hair and I have none. It's awesome, though. It's awesome. It's like
there's a difference, say, be in charge and have an opinion or have an input.
That's right.
There's a difference between having input and having an opinion. I love women's input. I never
get influence. Influence is not in charge.
Yeah. Decisions are caused.
It appears to be that, and what has occurred in the 20th century of America is the sale that women can be in charge to the women, and they believed it as if they could be the men and tell everybody what to do, and that was going to work. And it's like, okay, that's...
Well, it's that they don't know what to do. They can't conceive of what to do. It's just like why I can't empathize. I'm sorry, they can't systematize. And so
wait, but did you ever tell the woman that?
All the time.
What did they say?
If you talk to women one-on-one and you tell them that you respect their opinion and you're asking for it, and you admit what you're weak at, they'll always tell you the truth. They just won't do it when you're a guy talking to another group of women, because women won't defect from women for men. It's really easy. Women make sense. They do in their own crazy way. You just don't ask them to do it. They can't.
That seems reasonable to me. I like
You don't ask them to list. You don't ask them to list heavy things, and you don't ask them how systems will play out. The thing is that women have a very hard time abandoning the fact that they have very little control over their intuitions and emotions. They they want to feel like they can trust their emotions.
Well, it's their primary faculty.
Right. And
And
so
it's like, hey, this is goes to fighter pilots, okay? So here the pilots are like this, it's like this. A guy wrecks a plane and dies. And all the other pilots are like, pilot error. It has to be pilot error because we got to trust the machines, otherwise we can't do this. Right? It had to be an error by the guy who did it. Because we fly those things too.
But what people want to do is virtue signal giving shit away, which is removing a stress. That's creating fragility. And it's all we do is create fragility. And it's because it's women.
The body language is just priceless, man. Sorry, Curt. It's just priceless because it is utter despair. That was embodied utter despair.
Just
and it goes to Book of Isaiah talked about this like thousands of years ago, man. It's like, here's what he said. Isaiah's talking to the Israelites. He's like, you will be ruled by women and children. And it's like, oh hell. And it's boom.
So exactly, and I just don't like it. I want to be happy and ignorant and think women are wonderful.
Sorry,
on a pedestal.
Sorry. We don't live there anymore.